I see comments that you're not hearing me for some reason, and we just got to know. So give us a moment. We're working on it, everybody. Wait 1 second.
Can you hear me?
I hear you, Mark.
I hear you.
Yeah. You and I are going to have a great conversation, but we want everybody else. Okay, I've got a yay from Diana. All right, we're back on. Whatever you did worked. It worked. Great job. All right, we've got sound, everybody. So listen, I don't know what you heard and what you didn't hear, but we're happy you're here. Everybody go ahead and hit the share button real quick. We're live on both Facebook and YouTube. Hey, Pastor Carlton Funderburk, God bless you. Great to have you here, Pastor Carlton. Pastor Carlton, type in what city you're from. I don't remember where you are from. Type that in so we know where you're from. Everybody help us real quick. Hit the share button. Would you do that for us? We want to hit the share button this afternoon. And as we share, we're going to take a moment. We're going to go live to Ohio to our friend, Pastor Gerald Murphy. We're going to find Pastor Gerald. We are looking for him. So let me see what we should do. Well, who? I think Mark's good, right? Okay. Hey, Mark, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, Mark, just why don't you do this, Mark? Why don't you start by reading the first 2 verses of the 23rd Psalm, because we're trying to get a sound check and see if we're able to hear you. And then everybody let us know if you can hear Mark. Okay, it says the sound is back.
Sounds back?
Yeah, well, Mark, just talk for a moment or two. We want to see if we're back on.
Okay. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Does that come through?
I think so. Y'all let us know if you heard Mark, and that will be fantastic. We have sound again. We're going to go for it. Pastor Gerald, we're going to try one more time to say hi to you. I apologize that for some reason the sound is coming and going on you, but let's just try where we have him right now. We're not going to worry about a different link. Let's just try to bring Pastor Gerald back on, and if not, we'll get him at a different time. Pastor Gerald, we're going to try to hear from you one more time. So let's see. Can you hear us?
No problem. Can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can. So take a few moments and tell us what's going on in Ohio, what God is doing with you, about the ministry, and about what these classes and all that's going on with this spiritual journey, what it's meant for your life.
Absolutely. Yeah, so here in Ohio, we are, like everybody else, working through this adventure that is COVID and the most intense election that we've ever seen. And the church is really stepping up and being the light, being hope, really reflecting who we are called to be in times like these. We are on the west side of Columbus, planting the church in a community center in one of the rougher parts of our city, and just really seeing people come together and rallying around the vision. It's been really exciting to just to see that. And I would also say that during this time, there's just a major reshifting that's going on, and I believe people are very much ready to experience, just a new wineskin, and step into something that's more kingdom than we've experienced in the past. And so we're right in the middle of that. Outside of that, this time that I've been able to share with Eagles Wings and the Torah teachings and the trip to Israel it has just incredibly enriched my life. I can't really put in words just what has happened from the fall of 2019 when I was with you and Mark and Jose and Stephen and Pastor Joe and Rusty, Michael, Tim, so many incredible leaders. We were together last fall 2019, and I feel like my life has been just going at warp speed ever since that trip to Israel, and just been incredibly blessed by the relationships and the teachings, and just how much understanding, who we are as believers from the root of not only Jerusalem and Israel, the land, but the Torah, and really from having a shared and committed relationship with individuals like Mark and with the other rabbis that Eagles Wings has been so central in helping to connect us to. It's just been astounding. One of my favorite aspects of it is seeing the effect of what I've experienced bring fruit to my family. We're doing Shabbat meal every Friday now as we're ushering in Shabbat and the Sabbath. We do that every week, and we're sharing that with our church community and with other leaders in the city. Just little things like that have been just such a blessing to see how people are really becoming more alive and aware of just the deep-rooted history and heritage that we share together. So it's just been a blessing. It's been an incredible blessing.
Well, first of all, I think we've got a lot of our technical issues worked out. So thanks, everybody, for your patience. Although someone's saying they lost sound again, but we're going to do our best. But Gerald, I want to say, coming from you, those words mean so much, because when I encountered you, brother, I was amazed by your commitment to an intellectual faith, to an academic faith. You were an amazing combination of mind and heart. You were passionate in your worship, but you were equally passionate in understanding the word and in walking it out. And I just want to commend you. I really believe that you are one of the emerging leaders, in this generation. And so the fact that you're finding value in our tribe, just means so much. So I hope you can still hear me. And I just want you to know you're a huge blessing to all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bishop. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Stephen, Pastor Joe, all you guys.
All right. Awesome, everybody. Good to be together. We're going to go right now over to Mark Gerson, our teacher, and we're going to dive into the 23rd Psalm. And this is the quintessential Psalm of King David. King David, of course, was, the scripture tells us, a man after God's own heart. As a songwriter and as an author, can you imagine writing something that is still relevant and still popular and still known, 3,000 years later? I mean, it's mind-blowing. King David sat there somewhere, whether it was in Jerusalem or the springs of En-Gedi or Hebron. I don't know exactly where he wrote the 23rd Psalm, but he sat somewhere and he wrote out these words, and they are still powerful and relevant and meaningful to us today. And so with that, Mark, we're going to pass it over to you. Those of you who are on Facebook, if you can do us a favor right now and hit the share button. Part of what's happening today is it's a little different because today is opened up to Facebook. So we're not solely on the Zoom lens. So that's a little bit of what's going on. But if you'll hit the share button, that'll help us a lot. But Mark, we're glad to see you, brother. Take us away into the 23rd Psalm.
Okay, well, thank you, Bishop. So the 23rd Psalm is, of course, familiar to everyone, Jews, Christians, and probably even people who consider themselves neither, because it's such a part of religious culture and religious life that everyone knows at least some of the words, even if we don't know the meaning. But the meaning is deeply profound. Now, let's just start by quoting the great abolitionist preacher Henry Ward Beecher, who said that the 23rd Psalm has charmed more Greeks to rest than all the philosophy of the world. It has remanded to their dungeon more felon thoughts, more doubts, more thieving sorrows than there are sands on the seashore. It has comforted the noble host of the poor. It has sung courage to the army of the disappointed. Dying soldiers have died easier, it was read to them. Ghastly hospitals have been illuminated. It has visited the prisoner and broken his chains. So this psalm, which has been on the lips of probably more dying people than anything else, now we're going to try to learn what it really means. Because it means quite a lot. It's actually a psalm that is traditionally for the. Often it's said by people as they're dying, but it's very, very much for the living. All right, so Psalm 23:1. If anyone has their Bible or any computer in front of them, okay. A song of David. The Lord. All right. So first it says a song of David. Now, David's Psalms, half of them start with a song of David, and half of them start with to David a song. Okay. If you just read the Psalms, that's easily missable because who reads the introduction to a book, particularly if it's the same introduction or seemingly the same introduction to every book. So, but there's a big difference. So one is to David a song, and one is a song to David. This one is a song to David. And the difference really summarizes the approach to the religious life. One is, if it is a song to David, what that is saying is David is singing a song, which is the same word for prayer. He's making a prayer. He's singing a song before he's inspired. Okay, he's not feeling the inspiration right now. He's not feeling the religious ecstasy, yet he prays anyway, yet he sings anyway. The other kind is to David a song. In other words, David's feeling it. David's in church, he's in synagogue, and therefore he prays. It's definitely not that one is better than the other. It is that it's just two different approaches to the religious life. And we understand this as this one is a song to David. So he's not in a state of religious ecstasy. He's not in the proverbial church or synagogue. Instead, he's singing a song to arouse that feeling of faith, which he presumably does not have at the very moment. So he's praying to get inspiration. He's not praying because he has inspiration.
Mark, let me interrupt you for just a second. Did you just say that, maybe I misheard you? Did you say that the word for prayer and the word for song are the same or are close?
Yeah, very close. Yeah, same idea.
Really? I mean, that's fascinating that this concept of prayer and music and song being linked together. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah, and we see song all throughout the Torah. For instance, in Deuteronomy, it says, write this song for yourself. So why would the Torah be called a song? I mean, if one asked what the Torah was, you could say any number of things, but you wouldn't say a song. But in fact, that's what the Torah calls itself. The Torah calls itself a song. And the question of why the Torah calls itself a song is a fascinating one. But the Torah calls itself a song. And so here, this is David. He's singing, he's praying to get inspired. He's not singing and praying because he's inspired. Mm-hmm. And so this is a really profound statement of the religious life. And we know that because this one opens with this more La David, a song to David. And this actually gets to another way that we can get close to God. So it's not just kind of a description and introduction that you can pass through. It's a way that we can get close to God. It's that very often the work we do in faith, and that can be expressed in any number of ways. It can be expressed in prayer, it can be expressed in study, it can be expressed in human relationships, it can be expressed in giving. That work can lead us to faith. So a common religious mistake is people saying, I don't feel it, therefore I'm not going to do it. The answer is do it, and then you'll feel it. Right. You can be Mizmor La David, or you can be La David Mizmor. It doesn't matter. So if you don't feel it, do it, then you'll feel it. If you feel it, great, then you're fine. But then you're there in that sense. So this is David doing it so that he can feel it. And what is the result? The result is maybe the greatest religious expression ever written in the history of humankind.
Wow.
I mean, that's the result. He's not feeling it. He sings, he prays anyway, and what comes out? The great Psalm 23. And what does it teach us? It teaches us many things, which we're going to hopefully go through today. But one of the many things is that very often it's the work that leads to the inspiration. It's the struggle that will produce the blessing. So now we can get into this very short and very familiar psalm. So a song of David, okay? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Okay, so the Lord is my shepherd. This is a fascinating, very common, but it's a fascinating concept. And one of the reasons is that the shepherd in ancient times was the lowest profession. So there was one of the ancient rabbis, Rabbi Joseph Bar Mamna, said, quote, "There is not a more contemptible office than that of the shepherd." And in fact, we can even see in the Bible, who's the shepherd? The shepherd is traditionally the youngest son. And in a culture of primogeniture, like much of ancient culture was, and like the Bible rebels against, the youngest son was the lowest one, but the youngest son is the shepherd. And it was considered in ancient times a lowly profession. Yet, God is saying he is my shepherd. Thus, with this kind of great statement of equality, God is saying that profession that you consider lowest, David's saying, God's saying, that's God. So David is saying, the Lord is my shepherd. So thus obliterating the distinctions between lower and higher professions. Because if the profession of a shepherd is considered a low profession, who is the shepherd? God is the shepherd. Now, the other interesting thing about this fascinating thing is, so David writes this presumably later in life, and there's only one reason that he can write it, which is because he was a shepherd. So as we'll see, a lot of the insights we're going to see from this story come from David's being a shepherd, which teaches us a crucial Jewish insight, which is that we learn the most profound lessons about life, not by studying, but by doing conventional jobs. So this greatest of all Psalms is made accessible. David's able to write it for one reason only, because he was a shepherd. This great piece of biblical literature could not have been written if David were just a rabbi studying things. Instead, he's a shepherd. He gets the wisdom from his profession of being a shepherd, and he is able to write this song. So, and we're going to see throughout this that many of the insights that come in this familiar passage derive from David's being a very talented shepherd and a knowledgeable shepherd. Someone who is not a shepherd could never have written this. This is not just the Lord is my shepherd, some kind of nice analogy. A lot of what we're going to see comes from the work and the knowledge of someone who was a talented shepherd and could not have been gotten in any other way. If David was not a shepherd, this psalm does not exist. So the Lord is my shepherd, this great statement of equality. Now, the most important word in that sentence after Lord, of course, probably is my, because this describes David's relationship with God. In other words, the Lord is my shepherd. Not the Lord is a shepherd. The Lord is everyone's shepherd. The Lord is a shepherd of this people or that people. No, or all people. No, the Lord is my shepherd. So what David is saying is that my God is a very personal God. This shepherd is my shepherd. Is the other people's shepherd? Sure. But what's important to me in this moment is that the Lord is my shepherd. It's a deeply personal relationship with God. It's a deeply personal experience of God. So if something is mine, if something is ours, yours, it's deeply inside of him. So the Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is deeply inside of him. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Now, what is the role of a shepherd? So the role of a shepherd, obviously, is to guide the sheep. How does a shepherd guide the sheep? So we have to look in the distinction between shepherds and sheep. So a true shepherd tends to his flock with love and with devotion. So that is what David is saying. My experience of God is someone who guides me with love and devotion. And how and where will a shepherd usually lead? A shepherd leads from behind. The shepherd traditionally stands behind the sheep. So why would an analogy to God be he leads from standing behind the sheep? And I think we can see that in the great call of God to Abraham, where God says to Abraham, I want you to walk before me. In other words, I want you to walk in front of me. In other words, I want to walk behind you. So why would God want Abraham to walk in front of him? Because that is David was almost certainly understanding the role of the shepherd and the sheep from that. And this is what God wants from all of us. God wants us to walk ahead of him. So is God leading us? Of course he's leading us, but he's leading us in a very different way.
Mark,
which is why sometimes
let me just interject, because I mean it just leaps out as you say this, the verse from Isaiah chapter 30 verse 21. It's speaking of God leading us, etc. And here's what it says in Isaiah 30, and it's completely congruent with what you're saying. It says, if you turn to the right or you turn to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk you in it. So, I mean, that's extraordinary that Isaiah, who's kind of having this prophetic revelation, obviously is not a shepherd, but he still is saying, the way that this prophetic people are led, you're walking, if you turn to the right, if you turn to the left, you're going to hear a voice from behind you saying, this is the way. That's I've never, ever even considered this concept that God leads us from behind. Tell us more about that, because that is fascinating, and it also makes me think of that scripture that says.
I think that's why God says to Abraham, I want you to walk in front of me, which leads to some very important lessons about how we interact with God. One is that God wants us to be fearless. God wants us to be bold. God wants us to be courageous. God doesn't want us to sit around and wait for him to tell us what to do. Walk before me. So that's one thing. The other thing is, a lot of times when people have difficulty with faith, they say, and as in people, I mean people like Abraham and Jacob. And all of us. So believe me, Abraham and Jacob had plenty of difficulty with faith. We know that because it's all throughout Genesis, but particularly God comes to Abraham, gives him the great covenantal blessing, and then what's Abraham's response? Prove it to me. I mean, so, even give me another sign. And God says, okay, he does a covenant between the pieces. So, but very often the experience of faith is, where's God? One can say, and one often does say, this situation, this circumstance that I'm in is such that I don't see God, I don't experience God. And the answer is, you'll find out later. God's there. He's just leading you from behind. He's leading you like a shepherd. He's leading you from behind. Whereas if God was always in front of us and we didn't see God, that would be a very different experience of faith or lack of faith. But by knowing that God is always there, but because we don't have eyes in the back of our heads, we might not be able to see him. We're able to understand that God is always with us, even though he's not leading us in what we would say is a conventional way. But the shepherd leads from behind and steers the sheep. And how does the sheep see the shepherd? Through his peripheral vision. So the sheep sees the shepherd through his peripheral vision. So the Lord is my shepherd. A deeply personal relationship is my shepherd. No one else is shepherd. He's my shepherd, mine. Such an important concept. I shall not want. Okay, so I shall not want is fascinating. It's not I do not want. It's I shall not want. If it's I do not want, it's just a statement of what's happening right now. Do you want anything? Nope, I do not want. I shall not want makes the very important point that interpretation is a choice. I have made the choice not to want. I shall not want. When do I not want? I don't want now. I shall not want. When is the only time the expression I shall not want makes any sense? The only time that expression makes any sense is in the future. I shall not want. I won't want. I don't want now. I won't want in the future. So he's saying, I'm making a choice that I shall not want. So what does this mean about lack? Does it mean that somebody, that the person who is being led by God the shepherd, doesn't mean that person is perfect, they have everything? Of course not. No person is perfect. No person has everything. The entire Genesis is full, and as in Genesis as well as the other 4 books, is full of people, all of whom are completely flawed, who have many good qualities that they lack. So when he says, I shall not want, he's not saying I'm perfect. He's saying the opposite. So what could he be saying? If someone is missing something, in other words, if there's a virtue that someone, as in Jacob, Abraham, or any of us, or David, is missing, but I shall not want, what are we saying? What we're saying is that those parts of me that I want to change are actually potential blessings in disguise. It's the only way it makes any sense is if you say I shall not want, but I'm lacking things, is if we also accept the concept that there are blessings in disguise. And there's this beautiful story of a woman who went to the Rebbe, the great Rebbe Menachem Gerson, probably 40 years ago, and said, I just came out of the 60s and I went and I was worshiping idols, frankly. She went on some trip and was literally, she said, what I was doing, I don't know any other way to describe it. What do I have to do? And she was expecting him to tell her to go on this long fast or something like that. And what he said to her was, Abraham said, it says in the Bible of Abraham, he came with all of his days. Yet we all know that at least that Abraham wasn't always Abraham, that the beginning of his days, we don't know the details, but they were not as holy nearly as the end of his days. But you come with all of your days. In other words, what you did in your past helps prepare you and make you the person you are today. So it's all one contiguous story. And so what it's saying is that that what we think might be our deficiencies, if we realize that God is behind us, those apparent deficiencies very well might turn out to be blessings. Another example from the Talmud is Reish Lakish, who was the rogue of the Talmud. He's actually a gladiator. If we realize that God is... So he's a gladiator and maybe a bandit as well. And then through a whole set of circumstances, he finds God through the inspiration and mentorship of a great rabbi. And then there was another rabbi at the time, a Rabbi Ivri, who was captured by actual bandits and kidnapped. And all the other rabbis said, they said, we have no power, we have no physical power, and Rabbi Ivri's dead. And Reish Lakish said, either I kill them or they kill me. And he went and he rescued the rabbi. So what does that say? It says that he didn't abandon his previous qualities. He just transformed them into a blessing and was able to rescue somebody in need because of those previous qualities that he had. He didn't lose his physical strength or his ability to use it. He just transformed it to holy purposes. So that's what it's saying, I shall not want, which means that even the qualities in me that are no good, I'm going to turn them into things that are good. I'm not going to get rid of them. I'm going to turn them into things that are good. Okay, so the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And now let's go to the next passage here. I'm just trying. There's so much here. Just trying to find the next line. Here we go. He causes me to lie down, and we can ask any questions or discussions about the first verse because there's so much here.
Hey, Mark, let me take just a second because you're at a natural pause here for a moment, and just want to again welcome everyone here today. Today is unusual for our Torah Tuesdays class because we are on 3 platforms simultaneously. And so there was a little bit of a learning curve, but I think we got it figured out. But you will all help us if you will do this. If you'll hit the share button right now, that will really help us. Those of you on Facebook, I don't think you can share on YouTube Live, but you can. So YouTube and Facebook, if you'll hit the share button. Here's Yaron Carney tuning in from Tel Aviv. God bless you, brother, from Tel Aviv. We love you, Yaron. Hit the share button because next Tuesday? When is the 8th? Tuesday the 8th at 12 p.m. Mark is going to be taking us through the book of Esther. The book of Esther, and we're going to be making available my book, The Cry of Mordecai, that I wrote on the life of Esther that was endorsed by Rabbi Shlomo Riskin. But next Tuesday at 12 will be the life of Esther. So if you'll hit the share button right now, we went to these 3 platforms today to open it up more to folks who are not usually in the closed session. But the way that'll happen and the way this message and movement will spread is if you'll do the very simple but important thing of hitting the share button right now. So if you'll do that for us, we would appreciate that so very much. Also, just another quick shout out that we're working hard on the release of Mark's new book, The Telling. It's coming very soon. The virtual book tour is launching. So churches, prayer groups, ministry groups, we're going to be contacting you in the next few weeks, getting you ready for that virtual book tour, which will launch in mid-January. So get ready for that. But you've got one job today besides studying, and that is to hit the share button and help us spread the word. All right, Mark, right back to you.
Okay, so 23:2. He causes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. Okay, so he causes me to lie down in green pastures. Now, shepherds always want their sheep to lie down. Now, there are 4 reasons why a sheep will not lie down. One is the sheep will not lie down if the sheep is afraid. The sheep will not lie down if there is friction among the sheep. The sheep will not lie down if there are flies that are afflicting it. And the sheep will not lie down if the sheep is hungry. So these are the 4 things that God is going to do and does for us. He relieves us of fear. He will help us figure out a way to come to terms with those close to us. He will get rid of the things that are annoying us and stopping us from doing his will, and he will be sure that we have all we need in terms of our hunger. So he causes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. Now, another interesting question people ask about the shepherd-sheep analogy is obviously the shepherd is smart and the sheep are stupid. Sheep are one of the dumbest animals. And so one of the questions asked is, why is David comparing himself? And of course, he's not the only person in the Bible all the time. Why are we comparing ourselves to sheep? False humility in Judaism is a sin. I mean, we would never say that. You should never say. We would never say people are stupid. I mean, so that can't be it. It's not false humility. It's not subjugating ourselves beneath what is true. So why would we call ourselves sheep when sheep are stupid? Now, this kind of is a fascinating question to which there's no one right answer. But there are a couple thoughts. One is, what's the difference between humankind and all other animals? All other animals generally know what will help them and what will harm them, do what will help them, and avoid what will harm them, right? If you see a dog chasing a rabbit, we know exactly what the rabbit's going to do, right? There are no rabbits that won't do exactly what we're predicting, right? But can we say the same thing about people, right? All the time, what do? We do things that harm us. We don't do things that will help us. We complicate things that are simple. So in that sense, are people smarter or not than animals? In one sense, obviously we are. I mean, it's obvious that the people are smarter in almost every respect. But this is really helping us think about how are we as people generally and as individuals not smart. And in fact, there are lots of ways that we are or certainly act dumber than animals. Mm-hmm. And I think this is one of the things that David was really trying to help us think through is how are we smarter than animals and how are we dumber than animals? And because animals do a lot of things just by instinct that helps them and helps them do what they should do, avoid what they should avoid, and people do the exact opposite. No animal ever said the equivalent of, I didn't know what I was thinking, or I can't believe I did that. Right? But we do it every day. So who's smarter? I don't know. If I were the animal's lawyer, I might have a pretty good case. But
hey, Mark. Mark. So a lot of the comments people are asking. Could you take a moment and just go through the 4? Go through the 4 things again on both ends. The things that.
Yeah, terrific. So that's great. This actually came from this very interesting book called "A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23," which is it's a very interesting perspective because David could never have written this if he were just a rabbi. He needed to be a shepherd to write this. And so a shepherd, an actual shepherd, is going to have great insights as a fellow shepherd into Psalm 23 that David had. And this shepherd wrote, he said, a sheep will not lie down. And he knows he's a shepherd. Like, I would never know this, but he knows he's a shepherd. Sheep will not lie down if they are afraid, if there is friction, if there are flies, or if they are hungry. And we're going to see later in this what to do with flies. But if they're afraid, if there's friction, if there are flies, or they're hungry. So the Lord is my shepherd. Apparently, every shepherd knows that these are the 4 things that prevent a sheep from lying down. So this is what David the shepherd is saying God is going to do for me. He's going to say he's not afraid, no friction between people, no flies. We can all imagine the equivalence there, and not hungry.
All right, and Amy Cummins, who is the daughter of a pastor, so she understands the power of alliteration. Mark, we're going to teach you about evangelical alliteration. She's got it to the 4 F's. So fear, friction, flies, and food. All right?
Yeah, that's terrific. I'm going to use that. That's a great way to remember it. Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yep.
So he causes me to lie down in green pastures. And so we can see, we're beginning to see how David's only able to write this because he's a shepherd. Like he knows exactly the analogy he's making because he knows that's what keeps sheep up and why they can't rest. And and he leads me beside still waters. Now, in order to get to the water, as we'll see, for a shepherd, it's not always so simple, right? Very often, as we'll see soon, the sheep are on the high ground and the water is in the low ground, and the sheep won't necessarily, or certainly will not understand why the shepherd is taking them there, won't want to go there, but the shepherd knows that's where the sheep needs to go. They need to go towards the still water so they can drink. He restores my soul. He leads me, and the translation here is in the path, but the circular path of righteousness for his name's sake. So one way to look at he restores my life is he brings my life back. And the other, the analogy of the circle in the circular path of righteousness is also very interesting, because what we often think is that there's right and there's wrong. You just choose the right and avoid the wrong, and there's certainly something to that. But what would a circular path of righteousness mean? And there's this great teaching in Judaism. It's in Pirkei Avot, but it's really all over, that a mitzvah, a good deed, leads to another mitzvah, and a sin leads to another sin. So that's the circular path of righteousness, is that if you do something right, something good, the path-dependent following is another good act. So if you do an act of kindness for somebody, the odds are that person's going to want to do an act of kindness for you or for someone else. We see this all throughout the Bible, where generosity begets more generosity, and sin begets more sin. That's one of the reasons why we're forbidden in the Torah and basically everywhere else in Jewish thought to live in communities of sinners, because it's very hard to be the only good person in a bad community. We normally gravitate towards the moral standards of our community. So a good deed leads to another good deed. So a good deed is not something that's just done and completed. A good deed is something that's done, and then it starts a whole path of more and more good deeds. So this is what we're asking. This is what we're saying. We're saying God leads me on the circular path of righteousness. In other words, you keep doing a good deed. Other people do a good deed. You realize how good it makes you feel. You do more. So it's a path dependency. And we see this all the time throughout the Bible. So when, for instance, when Moses wins an argument with God to let the people who said they were impure celebrate Pesach Sheni, God says you're right to celebrate. The people say we're in a state of ritual impurity to Moses. It's not fair. We don't get to celebrate Pesach. Moses says, let me appeal to God. God says they're right, and then he adds to it and gives them more privileges. So good deeds lead to good deeds. Correctness leads to more correctness. So the great Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch did a Hebrew analysis of the word he restores or revives, Yeshov Bev, my soul, and says this speaks to something done more than once. So it's not that God revives my soul once and I'm okay, but how does God act towards me? God is constantly giving me serenity and constantly picking me up. It's a relationship. It's not he restores my soul, done. This is what God does. God is a restorer of my soul. He's constantly restoring my soul. It's a never-ending process. Here comes the line everyone's familiar with. Even when I walk in the valley of darkness, I will fear no evil, for you're with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Or otherwise known as even when I walk in the shadow of death. Okay, so what would it mean if I walk in the shadow of death? What do we know about a shadow? A shadow doesn't exist. Okay, a shadow is a reflection of light.
Wow.
No light, no shadow.
Wow.
There's no light, there's no shadow. So what's there to fear? Nothing. Because you fear that it's the shadow, but the shadow doesn't exist. A shadow needs light. So when we think we're in the shadow of death or in the shadow of darkness, there has to be light, because a shadow cannot exist without light, and shadows don't exist. You can't pick up a shadow and hand it to somebody because it doesn't exist. It's just almost an optical illusion that requires the presence of light. Just think about it. In a totally dark room, there's no shadow because there's no light. There needs to be light for there to be a shadow. So that's when you're walking. Now this gets to an earlier point. Even when what's the valley? The valley is a place in ancient Israel apparently that was near the water sources. So you would take the sheep from up on top. They wouldn't know why they're going. They don't want to go down necessarily. Apparently they resisted a little bit. Then you bring them to the valley, which actually is good for them. The darkness is good for them. It's a valley, but it's good for them because that's where the water is. Do the sheep know it? Of course sheep don't know it. And the same thing for us is that even when, this is what David's teaching us, even when you think you're in the valley of darkness or the shadow of death, maybe you need to be there because maybe the water is right there.
Wow.
You didn't know it because you're like a sheep, but the shepherd's behind you. He's leading you there.
And Mark, I want to just jump in here. First of all, this is just profound, as you always are. And we're excited for the book of Esther next week. And then January, we'll be launching, God willing, into Bereshit, into Genesis. But I want to say what you're touching on here, because what shadow are we talking about? We're talking about the shadow of the valley of death. And so this shadow is the shadow of death. And I think that this is highlighting this amazing core belief that both Judaism and Christianity share, which is that death is not the final word. And you'll know it, Mark. I don't know it, but the Declaration of Faith, of the coming of Messiah, it says that I believe, Judaism believes firmly in the resurrection of the dead. That is firmly, profoundly within Jewish tradition. And that's where Christians got the concept of resurrection from the dead. In Christian scripture, I'm thinking of the verse that says, "O death, where is your victory? O grave, where is your sting?" So this belief is, this powerful belief is that even death is not the final word. And we don't understand exactly how that all plays out. We don't know the metaphysical, cosmological realities of that. But we feel, as the great American playwright Thornton Wilder had an incredible quote where he said, each human being knows deep inside that something is eternal. However that expresses itself, whatever that looks like, there's this sense of eternity. There's another scripture, somebody will find the reference for me, that says that God has written eternity into our hearts. And this is something that is unique to the human species. There is this sense that death is not the final word, that death is swallowed up in victory. And Mark, you're pinpointing that today, that say death itself is a shadow. Death itself is not the final word. It's profound.
Right, but I think what he's talking about here is he's talking about not actual death. He said you're in the valley of the shadow of death. In other words, you're thinking it's like death, but you're not. It's the shadow of death.
Yep.
Your fears, it's just a shadow, and shadows don't exist. And one thing about all shadows is that they require light. Now, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Now, no one really knows if David is referring to one thing or two things, a rod and a staff. It seems to me he's referring to, these are both things used by shepherds. The staff directs the shepherd, and the rod sanctions, not the shepherd, the sheep. So the staff directs the sheep, and the rod sanctions the sheep. I believe most shepherds, or perhaps all shepherds, carry two things. Now, interestingly, there are two different ideas in the Bible about the rod and the staff, and God, the shepherd, carries both. Proverbs 13:24 talks about the rod. He who spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines him early. So the rod, which apparently and quite understandably to the son, it's not going to like it and doesn't look at the rod lovingly. But the point of the rod is to help the son. That's what it says here. He who spares the rod hates his son. And while the staff is meant to support, this is from Zechariah, there shall yet be old men and women in the squares of Jerusalem, each with a staff in hand because of their great age. So the staff supports and directs, the rod disciplines, and they both comfort me. So this is what David understands, is that both the rod and the staff, they both comfort him. Even the rod, which nobody looks to as a source of comfort, David realizes that even when I'm disciplined by God and were a child to his parents, whatever the analogy, even when I'm disciplined by someone who loves me, it's a source of comfort to me. It's a source of comfort to be disciplined, is what David has come to the conclusion of. And I think it's important. He's come to the conclusion. He's probably a king when he wrote this. He's reflecting on a long life, and he's probably a king. But he says that rod, that comforted me. Okay? So now he goes from from when he's talking about he's referring to God that well. Before, actually, in verse 3, he's talking about God as he. Now he's talking about God as you, and so he's doing it again. You prepared a table, so it's one-on-one. He's saying to you. He's saying, it's just like having a conversation. Like, did you tell me this? That's his relationship with God. It's a deeply personal relationship. The Lord is my shepherd. So he's talking to God as in you. So you prepared a table before me in the presence of my adversaries or my enemies. You anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Okay, so you prepared. When would you prepare a table for somebody? When you really care about them, when you love them. I mean, if you didn't care that much for somebody, and you just wanted them fed, just here, you take a burger, right? Whatever. It's just, but when would you prepare a table? We prepare a table for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, for Passover Seder. This is when we prepare a table. It's when it's like a really big deal. God prepares a table, David's saying. God prepares a table. That's how much God cares about us. He goes through the work of preparing a table. You prepared a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Now, this is always interesting in the Bible when one might think that, in biblical times, there'll be no enemies. Like, no, there are always enemies. There are enemies through the end of Deuteronomy. There are enemies here. He does not say you will get rid of my enemies because David lives in the world. And in the world, we have enemies now. We're always going to have enemies. The Bible tells us in Exodus there'll be an Amalek. Amalek was the tribe that attacked the Jews when we were hungry, weak, and in mutiny. And it says there will always be an Amalek. So David understands it. He said, in the presence of my adversaries. In other words, this is David to God. He's not asking God. He's not expecting God to eliminate adversaries. He's saying, you're going to prepare a table for me in the presence of my adversaries. So if you're preparing a table for me, and a table, it's like, who's at a table? Lots of other people are at a table. It's like you're preparing me this great meal. Now, apparently in ancient times, and again, David would understand this. Not only is David a shepherd, but David was a warrior. Apparently in ancient times, and I read this in one place, so I'm not going to swear to it, but in ancient times, if it does make sense given the story, two groups that were about to battle, the night before, they apparently would set a table and have a meal together, not with each other. I mean, each group by itself. So Group A and Group B, and they would be raucous. In other words, almost a kind of ancient warrior trash talking. In other words, they would to send a message to the other side, which was an earshot. Like, I'm not afraid of you. Again, I've read this only one source, so I'm not showing it's true, but it really does go here with the story. That you prepare a table for me in the presence of my adversaries. The adversaries would not be at the table. It makes a lot more sense that they would be in earshot somewhere relatively close by. But that's the table. So you prepare a table for me, relieving me of fear, in the presence of my adversaries. You anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Now, the way a shepherd got rid of the flies was with oil. And still to this day. So these flies really afflict the sheep. So the flies are afflicting the sheep. How does the shepherd help his sheep? He puts oil on them. And then we see my cup overflows. And what does eating at a table convey? So God is preparing the table. It conveys mutual loyalty. So what David's experienced in this deeply personal relationship with God that inspires him to say you, what he experiences is mutual loyalty. It's almost a token of a covenant. This is what happens at a table. This is the ancient symbol of the table. It's where mutual loyalty happens. Now, the idea of anointing also reminds one of the Messiah, who was called the Anointed One. So this is now we're seeing David's experience with God is really escalating and deepening. It starts with my shepherd, and here we are. He's talking about you preparing a table, anointing me, and then it concludes: surely goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for length of days. Now, surely is very interesting because surely indicates It's happened before. Surely goodness and kindness. You don't need the word surely. I mean, it could say goodness and kindness, but surely, in other words, you only say surely when you're sure of it, when we're very confident. So I have complete confidence that goodness, in other words, when is the only time that we would have complete confidence of something? Probably when it's happened before, right? The precedent gives us confidence almost like nothing else. So he's had this experience with God before. He's not coming to God for the first time. He's had a lifetime of experience with God. And sometimes there are valleys. Sometimes there are valleys in the shadow of death. Sometimes preparing a table in the enemies. The relationship with God is not like, they're just everything. He's having a happy life. He does not have a happy life. There are enemies. We know that. But surely, in other words, this relationship with God has gone through ups and downs, has gone through mountains and valleys. And keep in mind that a valley, too, has to be between two things, like mountains. Often two mountains will create a valley. So, but he's saying surely. So surely goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life. So goodness and kindness are two very different ideas. Something that is good for you, you might not regard it as kind. And the simplest analogy is that of food, right? We may know that a certain food is good for us, but we might not like it, right? Like everyone who has kids has that experience. But you want to get to eat it anyway. So, so there's goodness and kindness. Kindness is really God's grace, God's showing his love, almost without a direct objective in mind. I'm just being kind because that's who I am, that's who you are. So God is both good and kind. He wants what will help us achieve our objectives, goodness, and he's just offering us his pure grace. That's kindness. Will pursue me all the days of my life. So what is all the days of my life? Well, in David's life, this is David talking. So what was David's life like? It was very challenged. It was extremely troubled. I mean, we all don't know enough about the history of David, Bathsheba, his whole tortured family, extremely difficult life. And but goodness and kindness will pursue me all the days of my life. So even if I am in a rut, even if I am making terrible mistakes, David is saying, because David made his share of terrible mistakes, what he's saying is goodness and kindness of the Lord are pursuing me. In other words, even if I'm doing something wrong, your goodness and kindness are pursuing me to restore my soul. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of days. Okay, so what's David's relationship with God's house? So if you go visit someone's house for Thanksgiving, you probably, and imagine if you go to someone for Thanksgiving and you say, I'm just going to stay here for the length of days. The person would think, I don't know what they would do. They would certainly think we're crazy. I mean, I don't know what they would actually do, but that's certainly what they would think. If you said, it's really great to see you. I think I'll stay here for the length of days. You're never leaving? But in the house of the Lord, that's exactly what he's saying. He's saying, I will dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of days. He's saying, I'm never going to leave because you don't want me to leave. And that's the kind of relationship we have. So I'm going to stay in this house forever with goodness and kindness pursuing me. So no matter what I'm doing, no matter who I am, your goodness and your kindness are pursuing me to try to bring me back and restore me. All right, so let's and another point from the great, before we get to questions from the Ibn Ezra, is he talks about goodness and kindness. And, like so much in Torah interpretation, there can be multiple interpretations, each of which can be true, each of which can teach us something different, none of which is contradictory. So good is good for me, good for my soul. And kindness, you can't be kind to yourself. You can be good to yourself, you can't be kind to yourself, right? So what would it mean to be good to yourself? Well, like I know I should take my medicine or eat that food, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to be good to myself. What does it mean to be kind to yourself? It makes absolutely no sense. You can only be kind to others. So goodness and kindness, this is from the great Rabbi Ibn Ezra. He said, goodness is he's going to give me what I need to fulfill me, but it's also about kindness. It's about others. It's about inward and outward.
Amazing. And Mark, it comes to my mind that isn't it incredible that this is only 6 verses. And yet, here it's sustained throughout history, and I think it's a lesson for those of us, who are public speakers, that sometimes you can say less, and more, and absolutely, the ability to just whittle it down, and King David, out of the the drama, the pain, the beauty, the joy, the intensity of his life, out of all of that, he penned these words from the depths of his soul. And they have, as you read from Henry Ward Beecher, they have, impacted literally, the planet. Those who have a belief in the Judeo-Christian God, and even those who don't, find incredible comfort from these amazing words, as we have today. So awesome teaching. If you've got a final question for Mark, just type it in real quick. But I want to remind us.
Yeah, so I just have one last story, which I read this story now with both a rabbi and a pastor, which leads you to believe the story can't be true, but it must be very illustrative. So maybe it's true. There was a visitor to a church, or I've heard with the synagogue now too, and the visitor was a very well-known actor, and the pastor came over to the actor and asked him to read Psalm 23. So the actor agreed on the condition that the pastor would read it after him. So the actor read it, and we can imagine this deep, eloquent voice with a poetic accent, and everyone applauded. Then the pastor read it with his regular and older voice, and everyone started to cry. And the actor said to the pastor, "How come everyone applauded me, but everyone cried with you?" And the pastor said, "Well, you know the psalm, but I know the shepherd."
And we'll close there with a Selah from the Psalms, Selah, Selah. Pause and think about that.
Right.
Everybody, if you've not done it, number one, go follow Mark on social media. He's at therabbishusband.com. Follow his podcast on Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow him on Instagram, The Rabbi's Husband. Get ready for his virtual book tour. We're going to be reaching out to all of you in the next week or two individually to bring, in fact, I'm starting that this afternoon. So to bring Mark's book tour to your congregation or prayer group. And hit the share button. This is your last opportunity right now to hit the share button. If you've not yet become an Eagles Wings partner, first of all, if you are a partner, would you pray with us? We need 300 new partners right now between now and January 1st. If we're going to get current with our budget and if we're going to enter 2021 strong, we need 300 new partners. You can go to eagleswings.org to become a partner. You can become a partner for just $18 a month, 65 cents a day. It makes a huge difference when all of us are doing this together. So become a partner. And then also next Tuesday, the book of Esther. And that'll be our last class for the year. And then in January, we're going to hit Genesis strong and starting off. Now, I've been told to tell our partners that if it's easier for you, we're doing Facebook because we're trying to open this up to new folks. So we have a lot of new people here today on Facebook, on YouTube. We're multi-streaming today. But if you're a partner, you can go to your normal link that has already been sent to you. It's the one that's already been emailed to you, and you can be in on the Zoom call. All right. So if you prefer the Zoom rather than Facebook or YouTube, you can do that through your normal partners link if you are an ongoing partner. And Mark, awesome words today. I'm telling you what, there's so much here. We're going to keep this. You can replay this. This will be in your myeagleswings.org account for our partners. You become a partner, just go to Eagles Wings. Thank you, Elaine, for asking the question. Go to eagleswings.org/donate. And you can become a partner there. Help us bring young pastors like Gerald Murphy to Israel. Help us with the Day of Prayer for the Peace of Jerusalem, which is the largest global prayer initiative. In fact, yesterday, we had meetings with Japan, and we have leaders from Japan asking us to bring the Day of Prayer in, asking us to bring all that we're doing for Israel. They want us to bring it into Japan. We're starting to translate everything into Japanese. So this is a global movement, and we need your help in that. You become a partner, $18 a month. Go to eagleswings.org/donate. And it's really our partners who keep us moving forward the past 30 years. And we're so grateful for you. And I think that's everything. That's everything I can think of. Mark, we are so grateful. Any final word from you, Mark?
Thank you.
We love learning from you, Mark. You are a fascinating and an amazing gift to the planet. And we're so grateful to be occupying time and space with you at the same time. Everybody, last chance, hit the share button, get the word out, hit the share button and spread the word. God bless you. we will see you not Thursday night. We're not doing Bishop and the Rabbi Thursday, but we'll see you maybe Friday night for Shabbat. We'll see Sunday morning for sure, thetab.org, and then Tuesday for the book of Esther. God bless you, everybody. Keep praying for the peace